So given that this whole concept, this whole bill started in the election campaign with meetings with the premiers and the territorial leaders, there's been weeks since those meetings, weeks since parliaments have started. Is it possible, since there seems to be mixed messages about politicians sending listen and not, is it possible for either of the ministers to identify a single energy project, for example, that will be approved and ready for shovels in the ground in June 2027 if this law passes by this week?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, Ms. Stubbs, a very good question. Obviously, we don't want to prejudge whether Parliament will adopt this legislation. We're hopeful. And then we're also hopeful based on, I sat Monday night and had dinner at a table with the Premier of Alberta and had a long conversation with the Premier of Saskatchewan. They are very enthusiastic about putting quickly before the Government of Canada projects that, in their view, and probably in our view, would meet the national interest test. So I think we're going to be very fortunate by the volume of projects that will come together quickly. But, and I think this is instructive, this isn't a federal infrastructure program as much as it's a way to expedite projects that provinces and territories, Indigenous partners, private sector proponents will want us to work on in an expedited, effective way that encourages investment decisions. So I think we'll have well more than one within the first 2 years, but you can imagine, I don't want to prejudge what will be submitted.
Yes, and certainly we Conservatives will join you in your hopes and prayers, but obviously would have hoped for something a little more concrete. Because, of course, as you know, and I might suggest this is a first place for you all to stop, there are dozens of projects with real proponents spending real money, losing real time, stuck in the federal regulatory process, stuck in front of all of these various pieces of legislation and regulations that now you yourselves are identifying are barriers to getting built. That's why you're bringing in C5 to fast track these projects. I just would suggest maybe you want to start there with the real proponents of real projects stuck in front of your regulatory mess right now and give them some certainty. But to that end, can I ask you, how is it that the lack of the 2-year timeline embedded right in the legislation, including criteria and conditions that will be made behind closed doors, and then where projects will be adjudicated on an ad hoc, case-by-case basis, how do those two embedded uncertainty, not yet addressed in the bill, but we hope you'll accept some amendments in that regard, possibly give private sector investors or proponents that want to get these big, major nation-building projects to the benefit of all of us built? How does that lack of certainty in this bill give them certainty?
If I may, Ms. Stubbs, I want to start where Mr. Lawrence began, that a lot of us here are in violent agreement about the objective and that we do need to get big things built faster in Canada.
Certainly, and because you yourself announced that in 2022, and of course now.
And what I would just say is that there is a contradiction between the notion that specific projects should be named right now and the path we need to take to actually get things done. This legislation, quite intentionally, is about setting a framework which is clear, which is transparent, which gives transparency to provinces, to Indigenous organizations, to business leaders. And we need to sort of go step by step. We need to have the framework, have the transparency, hopefully get the legislation passed. As my colleague has said, there are a lot of projects waiting for this. We were together in Saskatoon, we heard from the premiers. They are very, very keen, but it would be inappropriate to actually specify the projects in the legislation. The right way to do it is create a framework, be having the conversations, and then let me tell you, as soon as this is passed, we're going to be moving with alacrity.
So what would you have to say to all the projects who will not be fast-tracked or make the cut?
Sorry, Ms. Stubbs.